Hey, what's up, everybody? Jonathan Bailor back with another in the series of SANE Solutions and calorie myth busting and talking about eating more and exercising less, but doing that smarter to burn fat and boost our health long term, and taking that seemingly crazy statement and backing it up with all sorts of surprising science, which is cool. And we end up with a completely different approach to eating and exercise, which, as crazy as it might seem, actually makes a lot of sense, because taking a completely different approach to eating and exercise, considering where the old approach to eating and exercise got us, which is the disastrous world we live in today, we've got about 70% of the American population struggling with overweight. Considering how poorly this starve yourself to health methodology has worked for us over the past 50 years, it might not be so crazy to say that taking the exact opposite approach kind of yields a exact opposite result, which is huge drops in the obesity and diabetes rates rather than huge spikes. So part of that, and this ties back to our last show because this is a 4-part series, is what the heck we mean by different qualities of foods. Because we can't, when we say eat more, I mean, people, they don't watch the whole show, they might go and just order 2 value meals from McDonald's. That is certainly not what is being advocated here. It's not about more of the same quality of food that has caused the obesity and diabetes epidemics. It's about changing the quality of the food we're eating and seeing high quality, what I call sane foods, as the most cost-effective and delicious and sustainable cures to the obesity epidemics in the world, and that there is a bit of a dose-dependent relationship on this medication, this metabolic medication, which just means, so let's say green leafy vegetables. I think we'd all agree that green leafy vegetables probably do something good for our health. Our grandmothers and our mothers were probably on to something. Science has borne that out completely, and it would certainly make sense then to say eating more green leafy vegetables is better for you than eating less green leafy vegetables. And I know that might actually have us eating a little bit more calories, and according to popular magazines, if we eat 10 more calories per day, over 10 years, we're going to gain 10 pounds. So clearly we should all not eat more vegetables because that's going to make us fat, right? Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. And the reason that's nonsense is because the quality of calories varies immensely. And in addition to your body being able to do different things with calories, as we talked about in the last show, which if you haven't seen, I'd highly check it out because we cover some amazing science showing studies where individuals eat more calories and actually lose more weight. We explain how that's possible. And we talk about the underlying principle is that different qualities of calories do different things in the bodies. And we talk about how eating more of what I call sane foods or high quality foods is the key to healing our metabolic system. Again, you can learn more about that in the previous class. But then the question comes up from the Awesome and Theos audience. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for blowing my mind, for showing me that everything I've been taught about eating and exercise is wrong, and then for telling me that I need to eat more high-quality, sane foods, and then not telling me what those foods are. I'm out of here, man. What's the deal? You can't just tell me all this good stuff and then not tell me how to do it. So what we're going to start doing in this series, or excuse me, this class, series, show, the world's changing. You never know what this is, but this is going to be a class today. In today's class, we're going to talk about what makes a calorie high versus low quality, why that matters, where you can find these types of calories, what the acronym SANE means, and why we associate that with high quality food. So lots of good stuff. The high level idea is that a calorie isn't a calorie. And you've heard this, the opposite of this, since the obesity epidemic started. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie. That's nonsense. That's like saying, well, let's put it this way. It's nonsense in terms of the way everybody actually talks about eating and exercise. So let's take a step back here really quick, and let's give credit where credit is due. If you're looking at what's called a bomb kilometer, or the scientific tool that's used to measure the amount of energy contained in foods, a calorie is a measure of energy, much like an ounce is a measure of volume. So for example, to say that a calorie is accurate scientifically, much like saying an ounce is an ounce. But let's take this now into the common sense arena. That's how a scientist would talk, but let's talk about how maybe a family or a normal person would talk. So we all agree that an ounce is an ounce in a conceptual scientific perspective, right? 8 ounces in a cup. So 8 ounces is 8 ounces, right? Yes-ish. But now if I sat you down at a table and I said, here's 8 ounces of cyanide, and here's 8 ounces of purified water. Drink either one because 8 ounces is 8 ounces. I would be telling the truth. 8 ounces is 8 ounces. But I think common sense would dictate that those cups of liquid aren't the same. Why? Because the quality of what makes up those 8 ounces is very, very different. The same thing applies to calories. Just like you measure liquid by ounces, you measure energy via calories. So yes, is 100 calories of spinach providing the same amount of energy in a bomb kilometer measurement system as 100 calories of soda? Yes. But are they the same thing? Do they have the same impact on the body? No. So that is the key distinction. So people are like, oh, a calorie is a calorie. Oh, yes, just like I guess a car is a car, but if my house is on fire and you pull up in a postal truck versus a fire engine, I'm going to be I'm going to react very differently to the quality of those automobiles, right? So anyway, a calorie is not a calorie. We've just got to let go of that. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And it also precipitates this nonsense that the body is a passive calorie balance machine. It works like a balance scale. Calorie is a calorie, so it doesn't matter what you're eating. Just follow the path of these people that come out every 4 years to get media attention, and they go on 1,200 calories junk food diets, and they're like, look, I lost weight eating 1,200 calories of junk food. Clearly, a calorie is a calorie, and we should all just continue to eat nonsense, but just eat less of it, which again is ridiculous. What we're talking about here is not, can eating 800 calories of Skittles for 8 weeks cause you to lose weight? Of course it can. Just like cutting your leg off can cause you to lose weight. Who cares? Does anyone think we should actually be eating 800 calories of Skittles? No. We're after long-term health. We're after long-term wellness. It's not that calories don't matter at all. It's that the quality of them is really what helps us out long-term. And for us to manipulate the quality of the calories we're eating, we have to first understand that we can do that calories aren't all coming from the same sources. And then we have to understand what makes calorie high versus low quality. So hopefully we've checked number 1 off that list. We understand that, yes, technically, a calorie is a calorie when it comes to a measure of a unit of energy. And even that's kind of not true. I don't know if we'll have time to cover that today, but the quality of what those calories do is very, very different. So what is a high quality versus a low quality calorie or source of calories? First and foremost, we need to get, I'm saying high quality, and I use the term sane very, very intentionally, because the typical word we use in these instances when we talk about changing the quality of what we're eating is people say eat healthy foods. So the term is healthy. But if you ask a vegetarian what is healthy, or if you ask someone who's on the Atkins diet what is healthy, or if you ask someone who just watches popular television what is healthy, you're going to get very different answers. Right? Healthy is completely subjective based on a person's existing mindset. You ask 10 people on the street, what is healthy? You're going to get 10 different answers. So we wanted to take a step back. We wanted to say, all right, we need a universal criteria. We need to understand what actually determines the quality of food separate from what the media is currently reporting, right? So we got to look at the scientific literature. And we have to say, first of all, what are the 4, well, we didn't know 4 at the time, but it turned out to be 4 things. What are the 4 ways that foods really vary? We need to know the variables first. Then we can analyze food based on those variables. And that's the acronym SANE. SANE just represents the 4 factors in which food and sources of calories vary dramatically across your grocery store. So, for example, the S in SANE represents the word satiety, or which comes from the same root as satisfaction. So this is how quickly does a source of calories fill you up and keep you full. The A in SANE is aggression, or what is the hormonal response this food causes in your body. Does it really aggressively cause your body to trigger hormones, or is it a slow, calm release of energy and hormones into your body? The N is nutrition, the factor that probably most of us are most familiar with. Clearly, that 100 calories of Pepsi provides us with different nutrition than 100 calories of spinach. And the E is efficiency, or how efficiently our body can use these calories as energy and therefore potentially eventually store them as body fat. So we can deconstruct each one of those, but the key thing to understand about when we say sane eating or sane foods, or on the other end of the spectrum, insane eating or insane foods, is the point of SANE is to provide us with a framework, an objective framework. It's not a moralistic framework. It's not an opinion-based framework. These are 4 factors that scientific literature, clinical studies have proven are not the same across different types of foods. So why don't we basically stack rank foods, looking at these different variables, and then we end up with these are sane foods, these are insane foods, and then there are foods that fall along that spectrum. So if you ask 10 people what's sane and you ask 10 people what's insane, you should get the same 10 answers because it's an objective criteria. All right, so let's jump in to high quality, low quality, sane versus insane. So again, it's a spectrum. So it's important to understand that it's not so much that there are some sane foods and there are some insane foods. It's a spectrum. So how satisfying is a food? How aggressive is a food? How nutritious is a food? How efficient is a food? And we have to look at all 4 of those factors. We have to combine them. So there are some foods, for example, that might be very, very unaggressive, but might be very efficient and might not be satisfying. So it's really cool too, because for example, if you're familiar with glycemic index or glycemic load, this is a measure very similar to aggression. It looks at the insulin response caused by certain foods, but that's just one factor. That's like looking at a car and saying we can judge the quality of a car by the size of the engine. I mean, that plays a role in the quality of the car, but it is not a complete measurement. So SANE is an aggregate score, let's say, of various foods, and it falls on a spectrum. So it also helps us when people ask, is this good or bad? It's not a question of it's good or bad. It's simply where does it fall on this spectrum? And so the faster you want to heal yourself, the faster you want to burn fat, the closer you can be to the sane end of the spectrum as often as possible, the better results you're going to get. Do you have to do anything? No. Can you eat things in the middle? Yes. Can you eat things on the insane end? Yes, you can do whatever you want, but your results and the results of those you love will be relative to where you are on that sane spectrum. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's very sane to eat large amounts of sane food. And that's what we're talking about. So what are sane foods? Let's give some examples. Let's flesh out this acronym a little bit more. So first and foremost, satiety. Certain calories fill us up, certain calories don't. And this is, in and of itself, life-changing. So think about how you could drink, hopefully you don't do this, but maybe you've done this before, how you could easily drink 600 calories of soda in a big gulp, and that actually makes you hungrier, or it certainly doesn't prohibit you from eating a Big Mac and the fries that come with it. But that's 600 calories. This is a lot of energy. This is actually because a lot of those calories are coming in liquid form. They're coming from sugars like fructose, which actually don't trigger satiety responses from our brain and in fact can make us hungrier. That's right. Certain sources of calories actually have negative satiety. Eating them makes us hungrier. Think Pringles. Pringles tells us once you pop, you can't stop. Think about what they're saying is if you eat these calories, they will make you hungrier. They have negative satiety. That's actually the point of light beer. Light beer was invented because regular beer was filling people up. So they'd try to drink it with a meal, but then they wouldn't have any room for their food. So they said, wow, I wish there was a beer that had lower satiety. Well, it's not really good for your health, but it's great from maximizing the number of calories you can consume before you get full. So calories vary completely in terms of how many of them you need to eat to make you feel satisfied and full, and then how long they keep you full. And I'll wait till the end of the class to tell you what these sane foods are, because good news is they don't vary between satiety, aggression, nutrition, and efficiency. There's common denominators, and it's quite simple. So we'll save that till the end. It'll also ensure that you stay tuned. So we've got sane, high satiety foods versus insane low satiety foods. Now we understand why those things work the way they do. Aggression, hormonal impact of foods. It's the opposite of satiety. And this is unfortunate, but we want to eat unaggressive foods. So we can't just be like, we want to eat high satiety, high aggression. No, high satiety, low aggression. And this is, when we say aggression, this is how quickly blood sugar and energy and hormonal responses are happening in our body. So having big spikes in energy is certainly not as good for us as having a slow, continuous availability of energy. Having our insulin levels, leptin levels, other various hormones spiking and then falling is not what we want. So we want to eat unaggressive foods. And this one is pretty easy to explain. We've talked about glycemic index, glycemic load. Diabetics have known for decades that different foods do different things to your blood sugar levels, cause different hormonal responses, and it's widely accepted that unaggressive foods that cause a slower, more consistent response by your body, better for you. Non-controversial, so let's throw that into the mix. And nutrition. We want to eat high nutrition, or what's called nutrient-dense foods. It seems like most of us feel like we have a grasp on what nutritious versus non-nutritious foods are, but I will challenge you to revisit that belief, because the way nutrition has been presented to us is not in terms of what really makes something nutritious or not, which is nutrient density or the ratio of nutrients to bad stuff, but just the total contents of nutrition. Let me unpack that for a second. Someone looks at a sugary cereal, they look on the side panel and they see, oh my gosh, this cereal has 15% of a million different vitamins and minerals. So clearly it's good for me. It's been enriched and fortified. The challenge with that, like, yes, that's true. It has vitamins and minerals in it, but it also has nonsense in it. So think about it this way. If you have a cigarette sitting in front of you and someone smokes it and you say, hey, you shouldn't smoke cigarettes, they're bad for you. And then they say, it's okay. Every time I smoke a cigarette, I take a vitamin C tablet. You'd say, well, that doesn't make the cigarette good for you. But they're like, look, the more I smoke, the more vitamin C I'm taking in. It doesn't really work that way, right? So if sugar and processed starches and trans fats are bad for you, it doesn't matter how many vitamin pills we add into those processed products, all that negative stuff is still happening. So for example, a highly processed fruit juice that provides us with 50% more sugar per ounce than Coca-Cola does, say grape juice, just because it has vitamins and minerals in it doesn't make it nutritious, because it also has a lot of not so good for us stuff in it. Another way to think about this is if you saw me eating a donut. Donut, we could pretty much say, we understand already, is not nutritious. But you saw me eating a donut and you're like, Jonathan, I watched that class, you're talking about nutrition, and now I see you eating a donut. That's not nutritious, that's insane. What are you doing? You would be justified in saying that. And then I said, okay, look, you have a good point. Give me a second. And I walked off. And then I came back with a plate of 10 donuts and just started Cookie Monstering them. Just 10 donuts in my face. And you were like, Jonathan, what are you doing? That is not nutritious at all. I would say, no, look, I'm eating 10 times more nutrition than I was eating before. I've got 10 donuts, not one. That's 10 times as much nutrition. Intuitively, you would know that's bananas, because I'm also taking in 10 times as much nonsense, right? So it's not just about how much good you're taking in, it's about how much good relative to how much bad you're taking in. That's nutrient density. So that's why, for example, vegetables, super nutrient dense, super sane. They provide you with a huge amount of what's good and almost none of what's bad. And this is where grains become confusing, because what a lot of grains do is they might provide you with some good stuff, but then they also provide you with potentially a lot of bad stuff, especially the modern grains. So that ratio is really important. Anyway, and nutrition. Foods vary in their nutrition. E is efficiency. This is the factor that is least well understood in the mainstream. And this is that certain sources of calories are used way differently in the body. So the simplest example is protein. Your body fuels itself either generally with sugar or fat. So carbohydrate or fat. Protein is a structural component. It's what builds your body up. So your body's really bad at burning protein as energy. In fact, it can't burn protein for energy. It would be like putting shredded newspapers into your car's gas tank. It just was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. I can't run on this. So if you eat more protein, what a lot of people find and what studies consistently show is they end up burning more fat, because if you get more calories from protein, which is a very inefficient source of calories, and fewer calories from very efficient sources of energy, your body will burn more calories day in and day out, simply converting what you're eating into metabolizable energy, and you will end up burning more fat. So the low efficiency of protein is what explains why diets that are higher in protein, not necessarily high protein diets, but just diets that are higher in protein, often result in weight loss. So foods and sources of calories vary very much in terms of their efficiency or how easily we can use them as energy. So summarizing all of this, we've got sane, satisfying, unaggressive, nutritious, and inefficient foods. And then we have insane, unsatisfying, aggressive, not nutritious, and inefficient foods. And I'll be the first one to apologize. I wish it wasn't switching between positive and negative. So I'll simplify it for you. And that is, sane foods have three things in common. So we'll go from 4 to 3. We'll make it even simpler. They're high in water, they're high in fiber, and they're high in protein. Insane foods are low in water, low in fiber, low in protein. So that's the general rule. And now let's take foods we find in the world and let's talk about the ones that are high in water, fiber, and protein, and the ones that are dry, low in fiber, and low in protein. So sanest foods in the world: water, fiber, protein, non-starchy vegetables. These are vegetables you could eat raw. You don't have to eat them raw, but you could eat them raw. That is the calling card of a non-starchy vegetable. You cannot eat a potato raw. It is not a non-starchy vegetable. It is a starch. Whereas spinach, leafy greens, broccoli, asparagus, mushrooms, bell peppers, cucumbers, all that awesome stuff, you could eat it raw. It is a non-starchy vegetable. Don't have to eat it raw, but you could. Sanest food in the world: non-starchy vegetables. Right behind non-starchy vegetables, nutrient-dense proteins. So these are foods that derive the majority of their calories from protein, and they provide us with a bunch of vitamins and minerals and not a bunch of toxic nonsense. So think humanely raised animals, wild-caught seafood. Think there's certain supplements you could take, like a pea protein or a rice protein or a hemp protein. There are certain sources of dairy that are high in protein, such as a Greek yogurt or a cottage cheese, which can be nutrient dense. So we're looking at nutrient dense proteins. Next on the list is whole food fats. So these are natural, generally plants, but often they can be animals as well. We find in nature they get the vast majority of their calories from fat. So these would be things like nuts and seeds. Whole food, it's a natural food. The vast majority of its calories are coming from fat. Other examples would be eggs. An egg is 65% fat by weight. Most people think it's a good source of protein. It's a good source of fat. It's actually not a good source of protein. There are way better sources of protein if you're looking at just eating protein. But things like nuts, seeds, eggs, certain fatty fish, certain fatty animal foods, again, they get the majority of their calories from fat, but they provide us with a bunch of nutrition. They're unaggressive. They're extremely satisfying. We want to get a bunch of our energy from whole food fats. And then following, the last officially sane food would be low fructose fruits, primarily berries and citrus. And the reason berries and citrus are the sanest of the fruits is because, again, they provide us the most of what we want relative to things we don't want. So are grapes going to kill you? No, grapes aren't toxic. But if you look at the amount of sugar relative to the amount of essential vitamins and minerals in grapes relative to blueberries or an orange, that ratio is very, very different. So why not just enjoy the sanest fruits or these low fructose fruits? On the insane end of the spectrum, good news, it's intuitive. It's stuff you don't find in nature. It's processed starches, processed sugars. They're dry, they're low in fiber, they're low in protein. All that nonsense packaged and processed stuff, it's insane. So not only does common sense tell us that we shouldn't be eating that stuff, but hardcore science and the new science of sanity tells us we shouldn't be eating that stuff either. Not because we have a vendetta against General Mills, not because we inherently think that sugar and starch is bad, but just we look objectively. We say, is it satisfying? Is it unaggressive? Is it nutritious? Is it inefficient? We just say no. So no judgment here. We've got an objective scientific criteria. We look at various foods, we see where it ends on the spectrum, and we just say, heck, man, why not eat more non-starchy vegetables, nutrient-dense protein, whole food fats, and low fructose fruits in that order? Just eat so much of that stuff that you're too full for insane starches and sweets. Unclog, drive up your sanity, eat more and burn more. That's what we're all about. So that's the short version of how to go sane, how to increase the quality of your calories, and how you can eat more and actually burn more. And I know we just scratched the surface. So if you want more information, of course, stay tuned. We'll have a bunch more in Theo's classes, but be sure to head over to SANE Solution. That's SANE Solution.com, SaneSolution.com. Sign up for your free plan and you'll learn way more about how easy and enjoyable sane eating can be. I'm Jonathan Bailor. It's always a pleasure. And remember, stay sane.